The moment my husband sat me down and said he had a request, I knew something was off. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a hesitation, a flicker of doubt. We had been married for 6 years, and in all that time he had never asked me for anything that made me feel uneasy, but this was different. I could feel it in the way my stomach tightened before he even said the words. "Please just hear me out," he began, his fingers tapping lightly against the kitchen table. I nodded, my throat dry. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I need you to do something for me. It might sound strange, but I need you to spend the night at a specific hotel, alone." I let out a nervous laugh, thinking maybe he was joking, but his expression remained serious. "Why?" I asked, trying to make sense of what he was saying. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "I can't explain everything right now. Just trust me." Trust. That word stuck in my mind, rolling over and over like a heavy stone. I loved my husband. We had built a life together, shared countless memories and weathered storms. But something about this didn't sit right. A million questions rushed through my mind. Was this a test? Was he trying to catch me in something, or was there something he wasn't telling me? Still, after a long conversation, I finally agreed. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. So, the next evening I packed a small bag and drove to the hotel he had booked for me. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the busy streets, with dim lighting that gave it an eerie feel. As I walked into the lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The woman at the front desk handed me a key, barely looking up as she mumbled the room number. My footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as I made my way to the room. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a chill run down my spine. Something was off. The air was thick, and there was a faint scent of something I couldn't quite place. I set my bag down and glanced around. The room looked normal enough, just a standard hotel room, but as I moved closer to the nightstand, I noticed something that made my breath hitch. There was a small envelope sitting on top, with my name written in my husband's handwriting. My hands trembled as I reached for it. Why would he leave a letter instead of just explaining everything in person? Slowly I unfolded the paper and began to read. The words on the page made my heart pound harder with each line, and that was the moment I realized. This wasn't just a strange request. It was something much bigger, something that would change everything I thought I knew about my husband. My fingers tightened around the letter as I forced myself to keep reading. My husband's handwriting was neat but hurried, like he had written it under pressure. "No matter what happens tonight, stay in the room. Don't leave. Don't answer the door for anyone. Trust me." My breath hitched. This wasn't just strange anymore. This was unsettling. Why would he send me to a hotel only to warn me not to leave? Was I in danger? And if so, why wouldn't he just tell me directly? I glanced around the room again, searching for anything unusual. Everything seemed normal, but now every shadow in the corner, every creak in the floor, made my heart race. I sat down on the bed, gripping the letter in one hand and my phone in the other. I debated calling him, demanding answers, but something held me back. He had been acting so serious, almost desperate, when he asked me to do this. What if breaking the rules, leaving the room, calling him, made things worse? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Maybe this was some kind of elaborate surprise, an anniversary gesture. But that didn't make sense. He had never done anything like this before, and if this was supposed to be romantic, why did I feel like my skin was crawling? The minutes dragged by. I checked the time, 8:42 p.m. The silence in the room felt suffocating, pressing in from all sides. I turned on the TV, hoping the noise would help, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. What was my husband hiding? Then, Something made me freeze. A soft sound just outside the door. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned toward the door, holding my breath. Someone was out there. But who? And why did it feel like they were waiting for me to make the first move? I sat frozen, my breath shallow as the footsteps stopped right outside the door. Whoever was there wasn't knocking. They weren't leaving. They were just standing, waiting. A deep chill crept up my spine. My husband had told me not to answer the door. But why? Who could possibly be on the other side? My fingers tightened around my phone. I considered calling him, but what if that somehow made things worse? My mind raced through the possibilities. Was I being watched? Was this some kind of test? Or had I unknowingly walked into something far bigger than I could understand? Then the doorknob rattled. A sharp inhale caught in my throat. My pulse pounded as I slowly stood, backing away from the door. The room felt too small now, like I was trapped inside a box with no way out. The latch held, but whoever was outside wasn't giving up. Another rattle, firmer this time. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to think clearly. If this was a prank, it wasn't funny. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. There was something deliberate about the way they moved. Slow, careful, like they knew I was inside and wanted me to feel their presence. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the rattling stopped. Silence, the kind that made my ears ring. I waited, straining to hear anything, but there was nothing. Had they left, or were they still standing there just out of sight? I swallowed hard, debating what to do next. My husband had insisted I stay inside, but every instinct in me screamed that I needed answers, and the longer I stood there, the more I wondered, was I truly safer in here? Or was I exactly where someone wanted me to be? I stood there, heart hammering in my chest, listening to the silence outside the door. I knew whoever had been there was gone, or at least I hoped they were. But the uneasy feeling in my stomach told me something was still wrong. The air in the room felt heavier, like I wasn't truly alone. I turned slowly, scanning every corner, every shadow, expecting something, someone to emerge. My phone vibrated in my hand, making me jump. It was my husband. I hesitated before answering, my voice barely a whisper. Who was at the door? His silence lasted just a second too long. I don't know, he finally said, but something in his voice made my skin prickle. He knew something he wasn't telling me. I don't believe you, I said, gripping the phone tighter. You told me not to open the door, like you expected this. What's going on, Mark? Another pause. Then, finally, he sighed. I need you to trust me. Whatever happens, don't leave the house. A sharp knock echoed through the room before I could respond. I spun toward the sound, my stomach twisting. But it wasn't from the front door. It was from the window. My blood ran cold. Slowly I turned my head, my breath catching in my throat. A figure stood outside, partially obscured by the darkness. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their gaze locked onto me. My body refused to move, trapped between fear and disbelief. Mark, I whispered, barely able to breathe. There's someone outside. He didn't respond right away. Then, in a voice lower than before, he said, Don't let them in, no matter what they say. I stared at the shadowed figure outside the window, my pulse racing. They didn't move, didn't knock again, just stood there, waiting. My breath felt shallow as I pressed the phone tighter against my ear. Mark, who is this? What do they want? His voice was quiet but firm. Whatever they say, whatever they do not open that door. A chill ran down my spine. The way he said it, it wasn't just fear, it was certainty. He knew something I didn't. My fingers trembled as I lowered the phone slightly, my eyes locked on the figure outside. Then, in the stillness, they did something that made my stomach drop. They lifted their hand and pressed their palm against the glass. That was when I saw it. Something small, something unmistakable. A ring identical to the one Mark wore every single day. My breath hitched. No, it wasn't possible. The figure tilted their head slightly, as if studying me. Then finally, a voice came through the window, muffled but clear enough to send a shiver through me. "Let me in." I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. It wasn't a stranger's voice, it was Mark's. I lifted the phone back to my ear, my hands shaking. "Mark, you're outside?" I whispered, confusion gripping me. But the response that came through the phone made my blood run cold. "I'm not outside." The air left my lungs. I turned my head between the phone in my hand and the figure at the window. One of them was lying. But which one? And more importantly, who or what was standing outside my house pretending to be my husband? My entire body felt frozen, my mind struggling to process what was happening. The voice on the phone was Mark's, but the man standing outside, he looked exactly like my husband. Same height, same posture, even the same familiar way he ran a hand through his hair. But there was something off. His eyes, even in the dim light, felt hollow. "Let Mr." In his voice was more insistent now, his hand pressing harder against the glass. I gripped the phone tighter. "If you're really Mark, tell me something only we would know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. The Mark on the phone didn't hesitate. "The night before our wedding, you almost called it off because you thought your dress was the wrong shade of ivory. You made me swear it looked perfect." My stomach tightened. That was true. But before I could say anything, the Mark outside spoke. "That's not what happened." His voice was calm, eerily so. "You almost called it off because you dreamed I wasn't the man you were meant to marry." A sharp chill ran through me. No one else knew that. I had never told anyone, not even Mark. My breath came in short gasps. How could this man know? I stepped back, my legs shaky, my mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't normal. It wasn't logical. Then, suddenly, the figure outside did something that shattered the last piece of my reality. He smiled, but it wasn't Mark's smile. It was distorted, wrong, stretched just a little too wide. I let out a small gasp as the lights in the house flickered. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. The voice on the phone, my real husband, was yelling now. "Get away from the window! Don't look at him!" The lights flickered again, and when they steadied, the figure outside was gone. Just gone. No sound, no movement. I turned, my hands trembling, and locked every door in the house. "Mark," I whispered into the phone, "what is happening?" His voice was low, urgent. "I don't know, but whatever that was, it wasn't me." I didn't sleep at all that night. Every shadow in the house felt like it was moving. Every creak in the walls sent a chill down my spine. I stayed on the phone with Mark until the sun began to rise, my hands still shaking from what I had seen. We agreed that I wouldn't open the door for anyone, not until we figured out what was going on. By morning, Mark was on his way home. I sat by the window watching every passing car, my mind replaying the events over and over. Who or what had been standing outside my house? And how did it know things only I had kept inside my own head? When Mark finally arrived, I ran into his arms, half expecting him to disappear the moment I touched him. But he was real, warm, solid. He held me tightly, whispering reassurances, but I could feel the tension in his body. He was just as shaken as I was. We checked the security cameras together. My stomach turned when I saw the footage. The man outside looked exactly like Mark, down to the way he moved. But then, right before he vanished, the camera glitched. A single frame showed something else. A distorted, shadowy figure with hollow, empty eyes staring directly into the lens. Neither of us had an explanation. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I kept all the doors locked, barely slept, and jumped at every sound. But nothing like that night ever happened again. Eventually, life returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after something like that. Mark and I never spoke of it to anyone. How could we? No one would believe us. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I feel it again. That presence just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting, watching. And every now and then I hear a whisper that sounds exactly like my husband's voice. But when I turn around, no one is there.